Hello, fellow IGNOU aspirants. Ready to absolutely nail one of the most important topics for your exams? In this explainer, we are going to master the role of the state in a market economy. We'll break it all down, piece by piece, so you can build that perfect, high-scoring answer.
So, let's jump right into the big question, the one that you're very likely to see on your exam paper. We always hear about how the invisible hand of the market is so efficient. But if that's really true, why do we even need the government? What is it actually for?
Okay, so here's our roadmap. I want you to think of this as the perfect structure for your answer. First, we'll talk about why markets need a referee. Then, we'll get into how the government fixes things when they go wrong, how it builds the very foundation of the economy, and how it makes sure things are fair for everyone. And of course, we'll wrap it all up with a super handy revision guide to make sure it all sticks.
Let's start with a really basic truth. No market can exist in a bubble. Even the best, most efficient markets have their limits. And in the real world, well, markets can fail, companies can cheat, and way too often the poorest people just get left behind. And that's where our story really begins.
And this right here is the main point you need to remember. That old school idea of laissez-faire, the government just keeping its hands off everything, that just doesn't work in the complicated economies we live in today. What we've learned is that for markets to truly work for everybody, you need clear rules and a government that's ready to step in and act as a referee.
Okay, now let's get into the state's first big job, stepping in to fix the problems that the market creates but just can't solve by itself. You can think of the government as the cleanup crew for when that invisible hand accidentally drops the ball and makes a mess. And here's a fantastic little trick to remember the three main roles of the state for your exam. Just remember this simple mnemonic. FPF. It stands for Fixing Failures, Providing Foundations, and Promoting Fairness. Get FPF down, and you've got the perfect structure for a brilliant answer.
First things first, let's make sure we understand this key term, market failure. So what is it? Well, to put it simply, it's when the market, just left to its own devices, gets things wrong. It kind of misbehaves, and that leads to a result that's actually bad for society as a whole, because resources get wasted. Let's talk about the first type of failure, externalities. Picture this. A factory on the banks of the Ganges is dumping all its chemical waste right into the river. Now, the factory saves money, right? But who pays the real price? The local fishermen lose their livelihoods. The communities need clean water. Everyone's health is at risk. That cost, which is pushed onto society, is a textbook example of a negative externality.
So how does the state fix this? Well, as you can see in this process, it forces the polluter to internalize that cost. This is a really important concept. By setting regulations, like pollution limits, and by using things like taxes, the government makes that factory pay for the damage it's causing. This makes them think about the true cost of what they're doing, which pushes the market toward a much cleaner and more efficient outcome.
All right, next up on our list of market failures is monopoly power. Imagine if the top 2 or 3 telecom companies in India all got together and made a secret deal to keep our mobile data plans really expensive. That's what you call a cartel. And by basically killing off any real competition, they can exploit all of us. And this is exactly where the state has to come in and act like a tough referee. It uses some pretty powerful tools, as you can see right here. In India, we have the Competition Commission. Its job is to enforce laws to break up these cartels. It can even block big companies from merging if it would hurt competition. All of this is done to protect us, the consumers, from being overcharged and to give smaller businesses a fair chance.
Our last market failure is all about information. Think about buying street food. The person selling it knows exactly when that food was made, how fresh it is, but you're just kind of guessing, right? That gap in knowledge, where the seller knows way more than the buyer, that's a market failure called information asymmetry.
So the state steps in to try and even things out. It creates product quality standards, like the ISI mark you see on a helmet or the FSSAI license at a restaurant. It makes sure there are clear labeling rules on food and medicine so you actually know what you're buying. These things help close that information gap, build trust, and honestly, they're vital for protecting public health. All right. So we've covered the first F for failures. Now let's move on to the P in our FPF mnemonic, provisions. This part is all about the really basic systems and goods that a market either can't or just won't provide by itself, but that an economy absolutely needs to function.
Okay, pay really close attention here, because this is a classic exam topic, the difference between public goods and merit goods. Public goods, things like national defense or streetlights, they benefit everyone and you can't really stop someone from using them. But merit goods are a little different.
Take basic healthcare, for instance. A private company could sell it, but a lot of people wouldn't be able to afford it. And because it's so good for society as a whole, the state steps in to make sure everyone has access.
But the state provides way more than just goods. It provides the entire operating system for the market. It builds the legal structure, courts, property rights, contracts that makes business possible in the first place. It creates a stable economic environment, using the RBI to handle monetary policy and the government's budget to manage fiscal policy. Without this solid foundation, the market would just be chaos.
And that brings us to the very last F in our FPF framework: fairness. And this one is a really big deal. In a country as diverse and dynamic as India, making sure there's fairness and inclusive development isn't just a nice idea. It's one of the most critical jobs the state has. Here's a really powerful idea for your exam answer. Markets are great engines for growth, but they are not distributors of fairness. You know that saying, a rising tide lifts all boats? Well, it's not always true. If you don't have the government stepping in, that rising tide can easily turn into a wave that sinks the smallest boats, making inequality even worse.
And that's exactly why the state must play an active role here. As you can see, it does this in a few key ways. It protects the poor with social safety nets, it uses affirmative action policies to try and fix historical inequalities, and, so importantly, it creates equal opportunities by investing in things like public education and healthcare. The real goal isn't just growth, it's inclusive growth, where everyone gets a fair shot at success.
Phew! Okay, we have covered the entire topic from start to finish. Now it is time to bring it all together. To help you absolutely ace that exam, this next slide is your ultimate revision guide. Let's lock in everything we've learned. This slide right here is your secret weapon. I'm serious. Pause the screen, take a screenshot, do whatever you need to do. Use these bolded keywords to structure your answer. If you can include these terms and explain them using the examples we've talked about, you are absolutely on your way to getting maximum marks.
And I'll just leave you with one last thing to think about, something that goes beyond the exam. As India continues to grow and develop, which of these three big roles, the state as the fixer of failures, the provider of foundations, or the promoter of fairness, which one do you think will be the most important for our country's success over the next 10 years? There's no single right answer, but it's the big question for our future. Thanks for joining me, and I wish you all the very best with your exams.